everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching. And welcome to What with Rep Ash. That's Well, How About That? I appreciate your tuning in to watch another show. Today we have a special guest from the town of Longmeadow. She's been here, working here for a little less than a year, but she is familiar with the town. It is my pleasure to have our town manager, Lyn Simmons. Lyn, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank you very much for asking me to take part. I'm very happy to do this today.
Well, I'm glad to have you here, and I think it's a good opportunity since you've been here, and we can talk a little bit about that. Half the time you've been here, probably more than half the time, you know, we've been in the pandemic, so there hasn't been as much social interaction, so people haven't been able to come in and see you. So these are a little, you start in a little crazy time. Why don't you tell people where you came from, how you ended up being the town manager here in Longmeadow.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, it's been about 11 months now that I've joined the town. Prior to this, I was chief of staff for the mayor of Northampton for about 8 years. I've been in municipal government since 2004, held different roles in the city of Northampton, from clerk to the city council and license commission, to assistant city clerk, and working in the mayor's office as an aide, and then the chief of staff. So along that journey there, I then got my master's in public administration from Westfield State University, and just knew I wanted to stay in municipal work for my whole career. And I jumped at the opportunity to come work for Longmeadow back in August last year when the job got posted, and was happy to be selected. It's definitely been an interesting year.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled to have you. Obviously, you know, you came at a time where, you know, things were going well everywhere for the most part, and then we got hit with the pandemic. Before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, for the people who haven't been able to meet you yet in town, you know, brief, whatever you're comfortable sharing about yourself.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I know a lot of those meet and greets that I had done early on were great, but I feel like I had just kind of started to hit my stride with meeting people and getting out in the community. And then, like you said, we got hit with the pandemic and everything locked down. So I am born and raised here in Western Mass, from Northampton, live in the house that I grew up in. I am married and have 2 kids, a son and a daughter. One is 6 and one is 8. And we are very much navigating the virtual learning environment right now that so many parents and caregivers are trying to cope with. So that's been interesting.
Yeah. It's definitely difficult. And, you know, having a family and a new job and then the pandemic, I'm sure that's been helped your stress levels quite a bit.
Yep.
Why don't you tell us, when you first got to Longmeadow and, you know, you got the job, you started as a town manager, what were some of the initial challenges or some of the goals you had when you first came in, or things that you saw as, okay, these are things we should probably be working on here in town?
Yeah. So the first step in any job, I guess, would be just meeting the people and knowing who the players are and figuring out, you know, the structure of all the departments and who does what and what authority they have over certain things. You know, every community is a little bit different. So learning that, developing those relationships with all the staff here in the town offices, that was first and foremost one of the goals. And, you know, certainly working with the select board to hear what they envision for the town and how we can work together to kind of take some of those projects forward. And I think some of the bigger things were just jumping into projects that had already started and getting up to speed on all of those, and making sure that we're taking steps to move everything forward.
That's how busy she is, getting work calls in the middle of our show.
Yeah. So, and certainly, you know, everyone's familiar with the 2 building projects that we have going on. So that was a lot to, you know, get up to speed on. And I'm happy to say that those are moving along pretty well right now, in spite of the pandemic. You know, they really didn't hit any major roadblocks there.
Oh, that's good. Now, So obviously you came in, you had to get up to speed on everything, get to know everybody. And that's a big challenge for anybody coming into a new job, a new town. How did your former position in Northampton, working for the mayor, how did that help you already working for a municipality and then coming into another town, smaller and different, but similar in some ways?
Yeah, a lot of the initiatives and projects are similar. Certainly, department interaction was very similar to what I was doing in the role as chief of staff. It was a lot of support to departments, which I feel like this position does as well. And just figuring out what we want to see happen here in town and what project or tool we could provide that gives a better experience to the public and the community and assist departments in getting their core mission done. That was really similar to the role of chief of staff, where we would identify a problem and then I would work with the department head to try to solve something. That part is similar. There's more interaction with the public in this position than there was in my prior role, but that was something I had a lot of experience in different roles prior to chief of staff. So there's a lot of overlap, and just the differences are the communities and where we are in delivering the services.
Now, is there anything specific or anything like in Northampton and say, we did that there and maybe that's something that they haven't done here, but really could translate? And that's what's always good about bringing different people in, because you have outside eyes who see things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think one major project that I'm really excited for, that I think the public and definitely departments and staff are going to see the benefit of, is a project called E-Code. And it takes your town bylaws and our zoning bylaws and puts them into a really easy to use and search format online. This is through a company called General Code, and they provide this service for a lot of communities in Massachusetts. So relatively soon after starting here and realizing that the town bylaws are in a PDF format, I started working with General Code and the town clerk to turn our bylaws into a electronic format here. And that's a project that's ongoing. I hope to have that ready for town meeting in the springtime, because it would involve a renumbering of a lot of the bylaws that would need to be voted on by town meeting. But I do think
Go ahead.
I do think that the public will really see a lot of benefit to that, because it makes it easy to read and search and find things.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Was it more for the benefit of the town employees being able to access bylaws, or for townspeople if they wanted to look up something or had a question about a bylaw and they wanted to be able to look it up easier?
Yeah, it'll be a benefit to both, really. But I think that potentially more of a benefit to the public, because it's hard to find something if you don't know exactly where to look. And this allows you to search by a keyword or an area of interest without knowing a lot about the inner workings of the bylaws.
Okay. And one thing I wanted to, you've been here a little less than a year, and one of your connections to Longmeadow, you actually went to school at Bay Path. And Bay Path is one of those hidden gems here in town. And actually, my second guest I had on was President Leary, as unfortunately couldn't do a retirement party, couldn't do it in person, but did it via Zoom. And she just did a remarkable job over there. And it's when I was on the select board years ago, I made sure that I got over there and found out more about it. And I just want to know your perspective on that and what you knew about Longmeadow or Bay Path, and how that connection helped or didn't make any difference.
Yeah, no, I have a great connection to Bay Path. It was a terrific experience. My aunt attended Bay Path when it was just a junior college, so that kind of gave me some overview of Bay Path. She encouraged me to go check it out, and I did, and fell in love with the school and had a great time there. So much so that I encouraged my sister to go, and she also went to Bay Path as well. I did a legal study major and had terrific professors that really gave me the foundation for what I think is a really helpful background in municipal government, is just learning how to research things and look up items. And it was a great time at Bay Path, and let me see the community here in Longmeadow. I wasn't, in the in the town all the time because I was mostly on campus, but certainly we would run out to go to Rinaldi's to grab a grinder. Sadly isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
But, or stop down to the shops and grab a coffee and maybe go to Gap or something.
Oh, that's good. Now, have you been able to reconnect since the job, or have you been too busy, or have you been able to make any of the?
Yeah, luckily, before the pandemic hit, I was fortunate enough to go and have lunch with the president, President Leary, before she retired. And I have met the new president via Zoom, and I'm excited to meet her in person at some point. I think she's going to be a great addition to the college, and certainly has some big shoes to fill because President Leary and Noel were pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely. They really made their mark here in Longmeadow and with Bay Path. Just, I mean, bringing it leaps and bounds ahead of, like you mentioned before, being a two-year community college to where they are now with Women's College and East Longmeadow. But that's a whole nother show. Why don't we go back to, so when you started, you're getting your feet wet. I know I came in, met with you, and you were learning all the different parts and getting it. And we'll talk more about some of the projects going on in town. But what happened when, all of a sudden March, when things all of a sudden started coming to a screeching halt? How did you, and with you throughout the town, how did you initially adjust, and what were some of the things that happened?
Yeah, so one of the most fortunate things I think through this pandemic has been the foresight of the fire chief, who's also the emergency management director, Chief Dearborn. Early in February or mid-February, he said to a group of us department heads, we really should start meeting. Like, maybe this won't be anything, but if it is, then we've already started meeting, and it's nice to get together anyway. So let's just talk about emergency management. And so we started having COVID-19 meetings by the end of February, which was almost 3 or 4 weeks before really the state, I think, realized that this was something we were going to be grappling with for a while. So that was one of the major positives in all of this, is that we had started a lot of that pre-planning before it was absolutely needed. And as challenging as the pandemic has been and uncertain all of this has been, it has provided me an opportunity that would have taken me years to get to in a normal situation, where I was able to build relationships with department heads at a much faster speed because I was having to work with them on so many different aspects of responding to the pandemic, that it gave a chance to only focus on our work in front of us and build those relationships much faster.
I think that's a great point. And I can remember back when we had the tornado came through, the similar situation for me, getting to know you're kind of thrust into the middle of a situation, and you really do see how good a person can work then, because you don't have time to really think about things. You react to your, whatever you're trained to do, or whoever you are. And obviously you've done a great job, and, kudos to Chief Dearborn and everybody on our emergency preparedness team. They've done a great job just preparing for anything like that, and making sure that we have the people in place, and talking about where to go, what to do, and all those things. So since that initially happened, what were some of the changes that had to be made throughout the town early on? And then we can bring it right up to talk more about like what's going on now.
Yeah.
But from like March through the summer, what happened?
Yeah. Most immediate was just the very quick shutting down of everything. So pivoting town hall offices to be able to provide remote business, and being able to answer phone calls that when people weren't physically maybe in the building. A lot of that was, a massive change. Municipal government doesn't really move that quickly. So to be able to respond that way in the speed that we did, I think was pretty well done. And the same with the schools shutting down. I know that's probably more disruptive to most people's everyday lives than anything else. And then really it was putting aside everything else we were working on and only responding to pandemic related things. The regulations and the guidance was coming out, every single day, if not twice a day. And so keeping up to speed on everything related to that, all the different changes regarding wearing a mask and keeping your distance and what was safe to do and what wasn't. That took a lot of us to navigate and then talk to each other about, well, what did you hear on that phone call? And did it jive with what I heard? And how do we respond to it in a way that's safe and makes sense for everyone?
And you're right. And especially early on, I think March, April, May, it was very fluid. I mean, it still is to some degree, but they just weren't sure how fast it was spreading, how it spread, how dangerous, all those things. And how are you able to translate that to the public, to let people know not only about some of the things going on with COVID, but town hall is going to be closed, this is going to be closed, and getting that information out there, especially because different people, younger people are more social media, older people might not. So there's a lot of different ways people try to get their information.
Yeah. Certainly communication is the most important thing in anything we're doing, but it can be a challenge because, like you just said, different people are comfortable with different types of communication means. So we early on started with a one town, one message kind of mantra that we had through all of our boards and committees and departments. So we made sure that whoever was putting out the message was the only person putting out the message. So we were consistent. We utilized traditional press releases, so they would hit our regular mainstream newspapers. But we also did our reverse 911 code red calling system in situations that we felt rose to the level of needing to get to every household. Facebook, Twitter, and the website, and then signage at various points in town of Long Meadow Street, Forest Glen intersection, the electronic message boards that you probably saw throughout town about wearing a mask. So we tried to hit every area that we could, but there's always room to improve. And
right, I think that not that you ever want something like this to happen, but a silver lining later on, it does force you to look at your weaknesses and look where, not only personally, but like town-wide, hey, this is something we could really improve on. This is something we're weak on, or something, hey, we're really good at this, that maybe we should share this with other towns. Were there any things that in particular that you said, yeah, the town really needs to up this, or, hey, we're doing great on this thing?
Yeah, we had both of those actually. The one area that we know we need to improve on, and we're working on it now, those electronic message boards that people have seen in town, those are actually not the town's. We borrow those from the sheriff's office, and they are in high demand for all of the communities around us. So that is one area that we're looking, we've identified as a weakness, and we're going to try to obtain our own so that we don't need to borrow them from anybody else. Because we need them quite frequently. So that's something we're working on. And one area that we really excelled in, and other communities have looked to model after us, was that multi-agency, multi-department approach that we took to the emergency management planning really early on, having all of the town departments as stakeholders in those meetings. And then one other area that's been really successful is a stakeholder group that we had formed in the very beginning as well, under the leadership of Chief Dearborn. Had the religious organizations there, we had Bay Path there, we had representatives from Glen Meadow and JGS there, so that everybody was aware of what was going on in each of those different agencies, because it all impacts the town as a whole.
Right. Well, that's good to know. And you're right. I think you hope at the end of something like this, and obviously we're not out of this yet, but you hope communities, individuals can come together and learn from it and come out of it better, and like you said, whether it's other communities learning from us or vice versa. So, and that's always good, that you don't want to go through something like this and you hope you can be better from it. You hope you can come out of it better and do things better and learn some valuable information. So, now, obviously, school was a big thing when it shut down in March and finished the school year, and then summertime. Over the summer, did you get many complaints? Were many people like, hey, open up town hall, or did you have much feedback from the general public? Good and bad?
A little bit here and there. I think people started to just expect that town hall maybe wasn't open.
Yeah.
Each business is so different, and I'm including, municipal offices in that word of business, but everybody was doing something different. So I think people got used to not being upset that maybe town hall wasn't open. But we did open some satellite offices in the community house. Those are available for the treasurer collector's office and the town clerk Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. They've been pretty well received. People have, done what they need to do in person there. A lot of the complaints that we started getting over the summer were about groups congregating, children not wearing masks or youth not wearing masks, people, using the basketball courts because we had put the hoops back up in late summer or midsummer, if I'm remembering my time right. And some other area communities hadn't done that. So we were noticing a swelling of crowds at the basketball courts, and they weren't social distancing and masking. So we, in response to those increased group sizes and complaints, we did have to take those hoops back down. We've looked at our signage in the parks to make sure it's still there and it's still accurate. We just put some more signs up at playgrounds because, people were, same thing was happening. They were looking for somewhere to go and maybe not wearing masks and keeping their distance. But I think each phase of the pandemic will continue to respond, as we need to, and as public involvement in the situations dictates, us to change our course on something.
Let me ask you, now, different towns have different policies, what they do, and I think sometimes that's kind of a problem, that if we doing one thing, the town next to us doing a different thing. But what's the policy here in Long Meadow for groups, for masks, anything like that?
Yeah, so for masking, social distancing, group gathering size, all of that we look to the state on. So we're following those state guidelines. We don't have anything over and above on masking than what the governor has put out. I know some communities that have, a downtown business district or a commercial center have put some masking orders in place by their Board of Health. We haven't done that here. We're following, what the governor has put out, and just personal responsibility, being aware of what you should do.
Now, what about group size? Is a number?
Yeah, group size. This is one of the areas that changes depending on what phase you're in and what step you're in of that phase. We are in step 2, phase 3, and group size is what the governor has laid out for that. I think it's right now that size is stayed at 50, I think, outside, and 25.
So you're staying right with the state guidelines. I know some towns or cities, tend to veer off and do different things. I think what's easiest for most people is if there's consistency, and that's probably been one of the toughest challenges for municipalities, for individuals, and but we're doing what we're doing, and we're getting by. Now, get through the summer, we get back to the school year, and I know last year everybody was hoping this would be over by then, but obviously it isn't. Were there any new challenges coming in, or did everybody learn enough? And I know a lot of this is part of the schools, but did you learn enough from like March and April to how to transition to the start of the school year?
I
know it impacts everybody in the town, like you said earlier.
Yeah, I think the difference really was that it wasn't so immediate. We had a little bit of time from June to late August to really think about the different directions we would go depending on what our numbers were and what plans got approved, specifically to school reopening. So there was a little bit more time. There wasn't such an immediate rush to, reopen, like we knew this was coming.
Right.
So just the planning there, regarding the HVAC systems and the spacing out of desks and getting our cleaning protocols in place, that maybe was a little bit easier than if we had just had to do it on a week's notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this, I guess the same, a lot of that, what we did for schools, we just replicated and modified slightly for town buildings as well. We have staff in all these buildings, providing the services, even though we're not open to the public.
Right. But as you mentioned, you have the information out there. People can call in or email in. How's that been? Like people trying to get information, has it worked itself out all right? Is there a backlog at all because it's over the phone?
There may be a slight delay. All of our voicemails that get received go to email, so you can access them anywhere you need to. The bulk of the calls right now relate to the election and ballots.
And we'll get into that in a second. I just want to ask a little bit. Obviously, the schools were a big part. It impacted everybody just because if kids were going to be home or around town. But how about businesses? How did you deal with the, I know early on, pretty much everything was shut down, and then we got further along in the phases. Some businesses are more equipped to be able to deal with that, and others aren't, especially restaurants. How did you deal with that, and what was some of the feedback you got from some of the, whether it was a local business or more established national businesses that are maybe up at the shops?
Yeah, that guidance was changing really rapidly, and it had different sectors too. What maybe pertained to something with a liquor license didn't necessarily if it was like a grab and go place like Big Y Express. So we made sure the health director was in contact with those businesses, making sure they knew about the changing guidance and if they had any questions. And then when the state made some changes to the liquor licensing laws in June, we responded very quickly by streamlining that process for the businesses so that they could get back up and operating and get their staff back to work. And that was in tandem with the select board, who accommodated some emergency meetings so that we could get those licenses modified and get them back open. So I think I haven't heard any bad feedback related to business opening or business reopening or knowing what guidance is. I know that many of them have just reached out to the different departments and gotten answers to the questions that they had.
Yeah, and I think early on there was confusion because obviously you're waiting for state guidance and they're waiting for your guidance. So I think that obviously complicated things, and people just weren't sure, when they could open, who could open, what could open. And sadly, I know we've lost a few businesses in town, but seeing some of the restaurants being able to utilize the outside, the parking lots, and it is amazing how creative a lot of businesses have become. And again, not that you ever want anything horrible like this to happen, but the silver lining, I think some businesses have found other avenues that they never thought of or they weren't forced to think of. And now they've enhanced their business and might keep doing certain ways. Obviously, restaurants, you have to serve food, preferably inside if you can. But a lot of the other businesses I know have been creative. So hopefully we get through this sooner than later and people don't have to suffer economically, especially our local businesses. You hate to see any people here suffer. They make a living or put their whole life into their business.
Right.
Now, coming up earlier, we had a town meeting outside that was interesting, but it worked out, I think, pretty well. It was behind or kind of the side of the high school and between the high school and the football field. Very hot out, but it was sunny. You could hear speakers. But now we have a town meeting coming up, and you can't count on the weather at the end of October. So what are the plans there, and what are the precautions or concerns that were going into that?
Yeah, that outdoor town meeting, that was something. I think maybe at some point we'll be needing to do one of those again. But yes, this October 27th, fall town meeting is going to be held inside at Long Meadow High School. We will be utilizing the auditorium first, and then going to the different other spaces that we need to as capacity fills up and we need to open up additional rooms. So we will be having 6 foot of spacing between seating. Families can sit together, similar to what we did for the outdoor town meeting, but this will now be indoors. Rooms will be connected via Zoom, and it's definitely going to be a little different than what people are used to, but I think all in all it will come off well, and we'll be able to continue on with what we need to do.
And I think people are pretty adaptable. I mean, it can be a pain sometimes, but I think overall people have adapted to these changes pretty well, whether it's a town meeting or doing business or shopping or anything. Now, is there a capacity or any that a certain amount of people that can be in the building, or how will that work?
There will be limited capacity in the different rooms, but we'll open up rooms as more people show up.
So if anybody who comes will be able to get in, there's not a cutoff, 200, 300, 400 people?
Certainly any town meeting that we hold, there's a cutoff because we don't have space in any of our settings to hold the 11,000 plus registered voters we have. So there's always a limit. But what we've done for this fall town meeting is looked back at historical data for previous fall town meetings for about 15 years, just to figure out what our numbers have looked like there. So we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to fit everybody that shows up for fall town meeting.
I can comfortably tell you we've never had 11,000 people show up. And that like we talked before, yeah, chances are people being cautious too. The numbers might not be what they normally would at this time of year. Is there anything on the town warrant that you want to talk about? Anything that people should be concerned or interested in? Besides everything they should be interested in.
Right, yes. We have 23 warrant articles. 21 of them are traditional warrant articles. 2 of them are citizen petitions. The warrant has been posted. It's online at longmeadow.org/town meeting. And beginning next week, depending on when you're watching this show, Tuesday, October 20th, we are launching.
Most people just keep this streaming constantly.
Yeah. We're launching a new tool, a citizen engagement tool called Community Voice. It'll be on the town website under the town meeting site I just referenced, where each warrant article is listed there as an idea, and it allows a user to comment or ask a question on that warrant article.
Ahead of the town meeting?
Yes, yep, great. And it's all posted publicly, and town staff will be monitoring it and responding to questions that come up. And certainly we'll be flagging anything that's inappropriate to be removed. But we're excited to see how this tool works out and maybe use it going forward. But it's a new feature that we're hoping will create some discussion and engagement for this town meeting.
I think that's a great idea. And I'll be honest with you that even when years ago when I was on the select board or before that, I mean, if you're not familiar with town government or government at all, the wording can be very confusing. And sometimes they're written almost in a double negative where you're like, wait a minute, so am I supporting this? Or, does this mean I'm for it or against it? So to have something like that ahead of time, I think can take a lot of stress away, because, I mean, when we get 1,000 people in a meeting, you can see some people they're really not sure what it's saying. And depending who's speaking, for it or against it, you might not be sure how you should be voting on that. So I think that's a great thing that people can have, questions or comments or feedback on it. So hopefully that goes well and people are appropriate as well. Other thing besides the town meetings, elections, obviously that's nationally, it's a huge thing going on right now, November 3rd coming up. We had the primary. Why don't you tell a little bit about what the procedure was for voting during the primary, and then we'll talk about coming up to the general election.
Yeah, so for the primary, for those of you that voted in person, you likely already know that we moved the voting location to Greenwood Center. This allowed us to space out the precincts more than we were able to at the community house, and it has one-way pedestrian flow when you get in the building, so there was less crossing of paths. So that worked out really well. We know that there were some issues that were related to signage. So we're making improvements there for the November 3rd election. Beginning Saturday, October 17th, early voting will start. And those hours are all posted on the town website at longmeadow.org. And that will also take place at Greenwood Center. So you can vote from the 17th through, I think it's the 24th. But I would verify that on the town website.
Call the town manager.
And Those that want to vote by mail are definitely welcome to do so. You're encouraged to get your application in by October 20th.
Okay.
And you can return your ballot either by mail with the self-addressed stamped envelope that's included, or there is a drop box on the front of Town Hall that's a totally locked and secured drop box for you to deposit your ballot in 24/7.
And what's it if I had a ballot, and what's the deadline to drop my ballot off if I had it via mail?
That ballot needs to be here by the close of the polls.
So if somebody came up at 5 of 8 on November 3rd, it's still valid. They could still drop it in, and somebody will close it at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
That's good to know, because I think a lot of people there's concerns about the election. Obviously, nationally, you hear a lot of it, but with the pandemic, with mail-in, it's good to know how the process go. Do you know percentage-wise what the voting was during the primary, how it was compared to any other elections? I know you didn't have time to look this up.
Yeah, I did have that. It's escaped me now. I did have it. Turnout was really much higher than I think we initially thought, but some of that was related to the ballots being done by mail. I can tell you for this election now, as of yesterday, we've mailed out 5,700 ballots, which is...
Now, those are all people that requested ballots.
Yes.
And presidentially, do you know what a number I know Longmeadow has a high percentage, especially presidential voting in general, but presidential elections are usually pretty high. Is there any expectation?
That we're expecting a high turnout.
Yeah.
Whether it be in person or by mail, it's going to be a high turnout. 57,
you said 5,700?
As of yesterday, that's what we had mailed out so far.
So obviously, if all those people do either drop them off or mail them, it will lighten up the load on election day, or the people that come in early voting too, which early voting I think has been great too, because it really, there's been long lines on presidential elections before, which, it's a minor inconvenience, but if you're social distancing, that could be problematic, where to go with the line, and depending on what the weather is. So I think having these, the mail-in and giving people the place to do it, and giving all the directions. I applaud you and others for doing that and making it as easy as possible. Obviously, we want as many people to vote as possible.
Definitely.
Why don't we talk a little bit about, so the November election coming up now. Any other precautions, any other things people should be prepared with or concerned with or understand?
I think the biggest thing is if you're going to vote in person, just bring your mask and go to Greenwood Center. That's where voting will take place, and use the parking lot that's there, and you shouldn't have any issues at all.
And I know I went up there last time just to see how things were going, and there's a police officer out front. It looked like everything was orderly, where people went in one door, came out another door. And I stayed for about an hour outside, and I didn't hear anybody complaining. It seemed like everything went pretty smooth, which is remarkable when you really have to change a building and change how you're doing things and how people are voting. So that was good. In town, obviously, when you came in, there were some things already going on. Why don't we give an update on some of the bigger projects, the senior center, the DPW, and any other projects or things that might be going on. We could start maybe with the senior center.
Great. Yeah, it's exciting to see that come together.
Yeah.
It's really moving along there. We're looking at a late fall substantial completion, with likely a move-in date sometime in January. They're really just doing all the inside work right now. The pickleball courts got put together a couple weeks ago. The construction trailers are out of there. The parking lot's been paved. Doing all of the HVAC system stuff now, and the elevators coming very soon. So it's been great seeing all that progress there, and I expect that even when we open in January, it'll be somewhat limited because we'll still likely be in COVID, but we'll certainly want to get some tours scheduled for people to go in and check out that space, because it's really something to see.
And if people haven't seen it, I mean, not that I want everybody, or you want everybody driving in and out of there, but it really is remarkable. I hadn't been there, from March for a few months, and I went over it just to see the progress. They've come such a far way. It's impressive looking too. So hopefully everything continues smoothly there, and it'll be great for the seniors and people in Longmeadow. Now, what about the DPW as well? I've seen a lot of the construction's gone up. Where were we at with that, and what's going on?
Yeah, so that is moving along really well also. I know I hit up quite a few snags, and most of that was before I got here, but luckily we had a fairly mild winter and they made a lot of progress, and the construction regulations that were put in place were really well adhered to related to COVID, and we luckily didn't have any issues there, and they have made a lot of strides forward, and we're looking at a similar completion date as what the adult center is. It would have been nice if it was a little bit sooner so that we could get DPW in there before the weather turns, but
Right.
It's still going to be a much needed space for them to be able to operate out of.
So do you believe around January they'll be able to move everything, equipment, personnel, everybody into the new building?
Yep, that's what it's looking like right now.
Oh, that's great. And what's the plans for people at home for the old DPW, for the old buildings? I mean, it's for anybody, it's old.
Yep. Yeah, we're looking at that now. Most of those buildings will need to be taken down. If not all of them. And we're looking at what potential reuse of that site might be in the future. One of the areas we're exploring is a community shared solar site. So hopefully more on that to come in the new year.
Yeah, and for solar, I mean, obviously it can be an eyesore, and that's some of the negative of it, but a place like that down there where it's really out of sight from everything, but you could still get an advantage. That's a good opportunity anyways. Anything else going on in town that maybe was going on before you got here, or has happened since you got here, or you're planning after all this ends?
Yeah. Well, one of the other projects that had sort of started in designing before I got here was Wolf Swamp Fields renovation. And that project went out to bid late fall or early fall. And that project was awarded to RAD Sports. And they're expected to break ground no later than the last week of October. So we're looking forward to that getting started, and that is expected to reach substantial completion in late May of 2021.
And what is the plan there? If you can give a brief explanation, what it's going to be, what are the changes, what it's going to mean for the townspeople?
Yeah, it's going to really revitalize those fields there and provide greater use with baseball and soccer. I think it's a multi-sport field that they're looking to do. There was a lot of public involvement in the design and layout. There was a core team that met over the winter and just looked at all the different options. They selected one option in particular, and that's what went out to bid and is going to get started in the next 2 weeks.
Now, what about the parking? Are they doing anything to the parking lot or the parking in front? I know that was always, when our kids were younger, it was tough when you parked right up front there, just getting in and out, because the street can be, traffic can move at a higher rate of speed than other streets.
Yes, yeah, parking. I do think there are some changes. I'd have to refresh my memory on the exact plan. I think it's primarily staying where the footprint is now with some enhanced modifications. Including some walking paths to the back area where there'll be a ball field.
Oh, great. Now, do you know how many fields there will be, or is that
if I remember right, it's 3, but I should probably refresh my memory on that. Don't take my word for it.
Okay, and a combination of baseball, softball, and like football or soccer.
Yep.
That's great. And I don't know if you'd know this or not, but behind that, there's a whole nother area. Do you know if there's ever any plans for that back there? There's a pond
behind it to the left, or directly behind?
Directly behind. If you drove straight through, there used to be a restaurant eons ago.
Oh, you're talking Turner Park.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I totally changed gears on you. Sorry.
That's okay. No plans on the horizon for that right now at Turner. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else going on? Anything you'd like to share with people at home that they should know or need to know or would like to know?
I would just encourage people to take a look at the warrant for fall town meeting. A lot of planning goes into that, and take a look at it, and certainly try out that new community voice feature. We'll see how that works out, and ask any questions that you might have, and make sure you get out there and vote for the general election on November 3rd.
Absolutely. Lyn, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I want to thank you for being here in Long Meadow as well. You came in at a tough time, or you got thrust into a tough time partway through. So I tip my hat to you, and I wish you all the best. And hopefully the next time we can do this in person.
Yes, yes.
So
thank you
so much. Thanks everybody at home.